I often find myself sitting by the window in the late afternoons, watching the sun fade behind the old neem tree across the street. The sky melts into shades of orange and pink, and in those colors, I see echoes of my past. The girl I used to be, the woman I once was, and the lover I had been to so many. There was a time when I never felt alone. Women came into my life like waves to a shore, bringing laughter, secrets, and intimacy that left me feeling alive. In my youth, I didn't have to search for love. It found me so easily, as though my very presence invited it. Back then, my phone would ring, or a knock at the door would reveal another woman who had fallen under the spell of my smile or my voice. I remember how they used to look at me, with hunger in their eyes, with warmth that promised nights filled with tenderness and mornings of lingering kisses. I was adored, wanted, and constantly touched. I had lovers who would whisper my name like a prayer, who couldn't keep their hands from my hair or their lips from my skin. In those days, intimacy wasn't rare. It was my reality. But now, at 65, the silence of my home is louder than any laughter once was. My phone barely rings. No one comes knocking, not in the way they used to. The world looks at me differently. When people see me, they see only an old woman, someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone who has lived her life. They don't see a woman who still longs to be kissed, who still aches to be held in the quiet of the night, who still dreams of warmth and the spark of passion. I never stopped being that woman inside. My body may have grown older, but my heart still beats with desire. My lips still tingle when I think of kissing. My skin still craves the softness of another woman's touch. Yet no one seems to notice anymore. It's as if my sexuality, my very capacity to love, has been erased by the years. I try not to let it break me, but the truth is, the loneliness is heavy. There are nights I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the feeling of arms wrapped around me, the weight of someone breathing softly against my shoulder. I imagine the taste of lips against mine, the warmth of being wanted. Sometimes I even close my eyes and pretend that I can feel it again, that any moment a lover will slip into my bed and pull me close. But when I open them, there is only the emptiness beside me. It is a cruel thing, to still have the heart of a lover but no one to give it to. I don't speak of it to anyone. Not to my daughter, not to friends. They wouldn't understand. They think love is something that belongs only to the young, that passion burns out with age, leaving behind only companionship and memories. But I know better. I know that the fire never truly dies. It just waits quietly, for someone to spark it back to life. Sometimes when I walk past the mirror I study myself. My hair has gone silver, my skin has lines, my body carries the marks of time. And yet when I look closer, I still see traces of the woman who once turned heads, the woman who knew how to love and be loved. I touch my own face gently, wondering if anyone else ever will again. There are moments when I hear my own thoughts whispering. Is this it? Is this how the rest of your life will be? Empty, untouched, forgotten? The thought makes my chest ache. I don't want my story to end with silence. I don't want to fade quietly into old age, pretending I no longer crave what once defined me so completely. I want love. I want to be desired. I want to be reminded that no matter my age, I am still a woman who can give and receive passion. And so, each evening as the light fades from the sky, I sit by the window and hope. Hope that somehow, somewhere, love will find its way back to me. That maybe one day when I least expect it, I'll feel that spark again. The spark that tells me I am not invisible, that I am not too old, that desire and tenderness still have a place in my life. I don't know if it will ever happen, but I hold on to the memory of what it felt like, and I let that memory keep me alive inside. Because even in my solitude, even in my loneliness, I refuse to give up on the part of me that still believes in love. It was on one of those quiet evenings that something shifted. My daughter had called me earlier in the week, saying she wanted to bring her boss home for dinner. She spoke of her with a mixture of respect and admiration, telling me how intelligent, disciplined, and kind this woman was. I didn't think much of it at first. I was more concerned about setting the table properly and preparing enough food. It had been so long since anyone new came into my home. That evening, I busied myself in the kitchen, making sure the aroma of freshly cooked dishes filled the house. When the doorbell rang, I heard my daughter's cheerful voice as she led someone inside. I stepped out, wiping my hands on a towel, and that's when I first saw her. She was tall, graceful, with an elegance that age had only deepened. Her hair was dark, streaked tastefully with silver, and it framed her face in soft waves. Her eyes caught me immediately, Calm, deep, and searching. There was something familiar about them, something that stirred a place in me I thought had long gone quiet. She smiled politely as my daughter introduced us, and that smile, it wasn't the practiced smile of courtesy, it was warm, alive, and touched something inside me. Her name rolled off my daughter's tongue as though she said it daily at work, but when I repeated it aloud, it sounded softer, more personal. She shook my hand, and her grip lingered just a moment longer than necessary. Not too long, but long enough for me to notice. And in that small gesture, my heart stirred. Throughout dinner, I found myself watching her more than I should have. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, her back straight, her voice measured yet warm. When she spoke, she didn't just talk. She looked at you, as if she was truly listening, truly seeing you. And when her eyes met mine, even in casual conversation, there was a spark. A flicker. Something unspoken passing between us like a secret only we could understand. My daughter was busy sharing stories about work, laughing, and keeping the conversation lively. I nodded and smiled, but my focus kept drifting to the woman across the table. She had the kind of presence that filled the room without demanding attention. Her laugh was low, gentle, and when she laughed at something my daughter said, I couldn't help but smile with her, as though her joy was contagious. I studied her gestures. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when it slipped forward, the way her fingers traced the rim of her glass absent-mindedly, the softness in her posture when she leaned forward to listen. These were not things that would stand out to most people, but to me they were signs. Signs of a woman who carried secrets of longing, of someone who had lived life with strength but also with hidden hunger. And the more I watched her, the more certain I became. She was like me. It was not something she said outright, but in the way her gaze lingered just a heartbeat longer than necessary, in the way she seemed to understand my silences even in the middle of a crowded conversation. When I passed her a bowl of salad, her fingers brushed mine lightly, and though it might have been accidental, there was no mistaking the quick flash in her eyes when our skin touched. I felt alive in that moment, as though the years had peeled away and I was once again the woman who could sense desire in a glance, who could read the language of hidden longing in the smallest of gestures. I found myself speaking more than I usually did when guests came. I told small stories, made gentle jokes, and she responded with interest, with warmth. She didn't dismiss my words the way younger people often do with older women. She listened, truly listened, and her smile when I spoke was one of recognition, not pity. As the meal went on, a kind of quiet tension wrapped around us, invisible to anyone else but undeniable between the two of us. My daughter was too busy chatting to notice, and perhaps that was for the best. But in those moments, it felt as though the world had narrowed down to just her and me, as though we were sitting alone in that room, our conversation flowing beneath the surface while the rest of the table buzzed with ordinary chatter. When she looked at me, really looked, it felt like two souls meeting again after being lost for too long. There was no need for declarations or explanations. It was as if she could see me, not the 65-year-old woman everyone else saw, but the lover, the dreamer, the woman who still longed for affection. And in her gaze, I felt the echo of her own loneliness, her own hunger, her own yearning that matched mine. I found myself drawn to her voice, the cadence of her words. Every time she laughed or smiled, it pulled me closer, as though gravity itself had shifted. The food on my plate went untouched more often than not. I was too busy drinking in the details of her. The curve of her lips, the softness in her eyes, the way her shoulders relaxed when she felt comfortable. It had been so long since I felt this way, the flutter of anticipation in my chest, the warmth spreading through me at the mere presence of someone who saw me differently. I wanted the evening to stretch on forever, for the conversation to never end, for her eyes to stay on mine just a little longer. By the time the plates were cleared and the laughter had softened into quieter tones, I realized something. The spark I thought had gone out inside me was alive again, burning brighter than it had in years. And though nothing had been spoken, no words of confession exchanged, I knew in my heart that she was like me. She was a woman who carried her own desires quietly, who understood the loneliness I carried, and who, whether she realized it yet or not, was searching for the same kind of connection I was. That night, as the evening wound down, I felt the air between us hum with possibility. Something had been set in motion, something neither of us could ignore. When dinner was finished and my daughter excused herself to take a phone call, I felt a quiet boldness stir inside me. The evening had been pleasant, but I wasn't ready for it to end. There was something in the way her eyes lingered on mine, something in the way her laugh softened whenever she turned toward me. I couldn't let her walk out of the door and disappear into the night without knowing her better. As she gathered her purse and thanked me for the meal, I placed my hand lightly on her arm. "Why don't you stay a little longer?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "We could have some tea, or perhaps a glass of wine. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed such good company." For a heartbeat, I wondered if I had overstepped. But then she smiled, warm, genuine, as though she had been hoping for the invitation. "I'd like that," she said. Her voice carried a note of relief, almost as though she, too, wasn't ready for the evening to end. I led her into the living room, where the lamplight cast a golden glow across the room. It felt more intimate there, away from the dining table and the formalities of dinner. I poured us each a glass of wine, my hands trembling slightly as I handed her the glass. She noticed, I think, because her fingers brushed mine deliberately, steadying the glass, steadying me. We sat close, not too close, but near enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence. For a few moments, we sipped in silence, and I wondered if she could hear the thrum of my heartbeat. Then slowly we began to talk. Not about work or family, but about life itself. She spoke of how lonely her apartment felt at night, how she often worked late not because she needed to, but because going home to silence was too heavy to bear. She admitted how friendships had faded over time, how even with people around her, she sometimes felt unseen. Her words mirrored the ache I carried in my own heart. "I know that feeling," I whispered. "The quiet that isn't peace, but emptiness. The kind of silence that makes you wonder if anyone remembers who you really are." She turned to look at me then, her eyes soft, almost shining in the lamplight. "Yes," she said quietly. "Exactly that." I don't know how long we talked after that, but it felt like time dissolved. We shared pieces of ourselves that we rarely spoke aloud, the desires we'd tucked away, the regrets that still haunted us, the longing for a kind of closeness that seemed out of reach at this age. It was as though the more we spoke, the more we recognized each other, not just as two women at the same table, but as kindred spirits who had been walking the same lonely path. At one point, I laughed softly at a memory of my younger days, of how easily love used to find me. She smiled, and then her expression grew tender. "You must have been magnetic," she said. "I can see it even now." Her words sent a rush of warmth through me, and I lowered my gaze, flustered. "Maybe once. But now?" I trailed off, shaking my head. She reached out then, slowly, deliberately, and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was warm, her touch steady. "Now too," she said firmly. The room seemed to still around us. I looked at her hand on mine, the simple intimacy of it, and then up into her eyes. There was no mistaking what I saw there. No pity, no politeness. It was desire. Real, unguarded, and aching. I tightened my fingers around hers, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was full of everything we hadn't dared to say. I felt the years peel away in that instant. My heart raced as though I were 20 again, sitting across from a woman who saw me, wanted me, touched me. It wasn't in my imagination. She was like me. She was yearning, searching, waiting for someone who understood. We sat like that for a long time, our hands joined, our voices low, sharing confessions and silences alike. Every brush of her thumb against my skin sent a ripple through me, awakening parts of me I thought had been buried forever. When the clock ticked later into the night, I realized with a sudden, overwhelming clarity that my life had shifted. Something had begun between us, something fragile yet undeniable. For the first time in many years, I didn't feel like an old woman forgotten by desire. I felt alive, radiant, seen. And as I walked her to the door later, her hand still brushing against mine as though reluctant to let go, I knew this was only the beginning. The night air was cool when I opened the door for her. The street outside was quiet, the kind of stillness that makes every sound, the click of her heels, the rustle of leaves, feel more intimate. She lingered in the doorway, her hand still resting on mine, as though neither of us wanted to sever the fragile thread that had formed between us. I could feel my pulse racing. It was such a strange, almost foolish thing. At 65, here I was, feeling the flutter of nervous excitement I hadn't felt since girlhood. My heart beat against my ribs with an insistence that almost frightened me. It was as if my body remembered how to be young, how to be alive, how to anticipate the touch of another woman. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. Her lips parted as though words hovered there but would not come. I swallowed, trying to find my voice, but my throat felt tight. For a long moment, we simply stood there, close enough that I could feel her breath against my cheek. It could have gone either way. She could have smiled politely, thanked me again, and walked out into the night. I could have let her go, closed the door, and pretended that this wasn't the spark of something I had long thought lost. But something in her gaze held me still. Something aching, something desperate, something that mirrored my own longing. Without thinking, I lifted my hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face. My fingers trembled as they grazed her cheek, but she leaned into the touch ever so slightly, her eyes closing for just a second. That single gesture gave me courage. And then it happened. I don't remember who moved first. Perhaps it was her leaning forward, perhaps it was me stepping closer, but suddenly our lips were touching. Tentatively at first, a soft brush, almost a question. My breath caught in my chest. The second kiss was surer. Her lips pressed against mine with warmth, with hunger barely contained. I felt my whole body tremble, my knees weak as though I were a young woman again, stealing a kiss in secret. But this wasn't stolen, it was given, offered, shared. Her hand slid up to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I melted into her. I could taste the faint trace of wine on her lips, feel the heat of her skin, the unspoken urgency behind the kiss. It was not just passion, it was years of loneliness spilling out, years of silence breaking open. It was two souls finding their reflection in each other at last. When we finally pulled back, our foreheads rested together, both of us breathing hard, both of us laughing softly at the absurd beauty of it all. My hands were still trembling, and hers held my face as though she never wanted to let go. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice hushed, as if speaking louder might shatter the moment. "I thought I was the only one. That no one else." I touched her lips lightly with my finger. "You're not the only one," I said softly. "Not anymore." Her eyes glistened, and I realized then that she had been just as desperate as I was, just as starved for intimacy, for tenderness, for the simple affirmation that she was still a woman who could be loved. We kissed again, slower this time, savoring it, letting every second linger. Each brush of her lips against mine sent ripples of warmth through me, awakening parts of me I thought had long gone dormant. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might give away my age, but in her arms, I didn't feel 65. I felt timeless. Between kisses, we spoke in fragments, confessions slipping out between breaths. "I've missed this so much," she murmured against my mouth. "So have I whispered back. "I thought it was too late for me." "I thought so too. Until tonight." The words hung between us, fragile but true, like promises waiting to be made. At last, she pulled back just enough to look at me fully. "I don't want this to be the last time," she said, her hand still caressing my cheek. "Would you come with me, perhaps tomorrow evening? We could go out, somewhere quiet. Just the two of us." Her voice was tentative, hopeful. My chest ached with the sweetness of it. I nodded, smiling through the tears that had gathered in my eyes. "Yes, I'd love that." The relief in her face was immediate, and she pulled me into another kiss. Soft, tender, the kind of kiss that says thank you for wanting me too. We stood there in the doorway, kissing and holding each other, as though the world outside had ceased to exist. My hands slipped around her waist, and hers held me close, and for the first time in years, I felt the comfort of being embraced, of belonging. Eventually, she pulled back, pressing one last kiss to my lips, then another to my forehead, lingering there as though reluctant to part. "I should go," she whispered, though her arms tightened around me even as she said it. I smiled through the ache of letting her go. "Tomorrow," I reminded her softly. She nodded, her smile luminous, and then she stepped into the night. I watched her walk down the path, the lamplight catching her figure, until she disappeared into the shadows. My heart was still pounding, my lips tingling with the memory of her kisses. When I finally closed the door, I leaned against it, pressing my fingers to my mouth. I laughed. Quiet, breathless, a laugh filled with disbelief and joy. After all the years of loneliness, after all the nights of silence, love had walked into my home, sat at my table, and kissed me as though no time had ever passed. That night, I didn't lie awake in emptiness. I lay in bed with my eyes closed, touching my lips, replaying the softness of her kiss, the warmth of her hands, the promise in her eyes. And for the first time in so long, I drifted into sleep not with longing, but with anticipation. knowing that tomorrow I would see her again. That morning, I woke up feeling like a girl again, not the 65-year-old woman I saw in the mirror most days. My heart beat with a giddy nervousness that I hadn't known in decades. It was the day of my date with her, my daughter's boss, the woman who had stirred something inside me I thought had long gone silent. I stood before my wardrobe for what felt like hours, pulling out dresses I hadn't worn in years. Each one carried a memory. Parties in my 30s, quiet dinners in my 40s, weddings I had attended with a smile hiding my solitude. Today, I wanted to look not just elegant but alive. I settled on a soft blue dress that draped gently against my body, modest yet flattering. I even applied a bit of blush, lipstick, and perfume, the kind I hadn't touched since my youth. My hands trembled as I leaned close to the mirror, touching up my eyeliner. For the first time in so long, I wanted to be seen, desired. When I arrived at the quiet little restaurant she had chosen, I saw her waiting at a corner table. She looked radiant in a cream blouse and a long skirt, her hair neatly brushed, her lips painted a shade of rose that made my heart beat faster. She rose when she saw me, her eyes lighting up with a warmth that sent a wave of reassurance through me. "You look beautiful," she said softly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. The touch lingered, her breath close, her voice a melody that stirred every hidden longing in me. Dinner was slow, deliberate. We weren't in a rush. We spoke of our younger years, of loves that had slipped through our fingers, of the loneliness that crept in during the nights. She told me about her failed relationships, how she had always been searching for someone who understood her heart, not just her body. I admitted how much I had missed a woman's touch, how years had turned into decades of silence and yearning. Our words weren't dramatic, they were honest, like two old friends bearing the truths they had hidden from the world. Yet, even as we spoke, there was a current beneath the conversation, a steady hum of attraction. Her eyes lingered on me, tracing my face with a tenderness I had only ever dreamed of. At one point, as I laughed softly at something she said, her hand slid across the table, brushing against mine. I let my fingers stay there, trembling but unwilling to move away. Slowly, she wrapped her hand around mine, her thumb stroking the back of it. My breath caught, my pulse quickened. After dinner, we walked along the lake near the restaurant. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from nearby gardens. The moonlight shimmered on the water, painting everything silver. We walked close, our shoulders brushing, our hands brushing until finally she took mine fully into hers. "You make me feel young again," she whispered, her voice quivering with vulnerability. I turned to her, my heart swelling. "So do you." I thought this part of me was gone forever. We stopped under a tree where the branches swayed gently in the breeze. She turned, cupping my face with her hands, and before I could think or breathe, her lips pressed against mine. It was no shy kiss this time. It was deeper, hungrier, filled with years of suppressed longing. I felt her desperation, her need, and I matched it with my own. We kissed again and again, our hands holding tight as if afraid to let go. Her lips were warm, her breath uneven, and as she pulled back just slightly, her forehead resting against mine, she whispered, "I've wanted this for so long. You don't know how much." I kissed her again in answer, pouring into it all the emotions I couldn't put into words. Time seemed to stop as we stood there, two women in their later years rediscovering the magic of being wanted, of being loved. When the night grew colder, she walked me to my car, but we lingered, neither of us wanting to part. She kissed me again. Slow, lingering, a promise. "Come see me again," she said. "I don't want this to end here." And in that moment, I felt as if I had stepped into a second youth. My heart, long silent, was alive again, beating for her. The loneliness I had carried for so many years felt lighter, replaced with the fragile, beautiful hope of love. Those first nights together felt like stepping into a dream I had long ago locked away, a dream I never thought would return to me. The first evening I stayed at her place, I remember how nervous I was walking through her door. My hands trembled as she took my coat and set it gently aside. But when she smiled and guided me to her living room, pouring us each a glass of wine, my heart began to steady. There was no rush in her movements, no urgency. She treated every moment as if it were precious, and for me, it truly was. We sat close on her couch, our knees brushing, the warmth of her body seeping into mine. Slowly, our words gave way to silence, and in that silence, she reached for me, her hand resting over mine. I turned, and there she was, her eyes glistening with an emotion I hadn't seen in years. When she leaned in, I met her halfway. Our kiss was slow, tender, filled with both hesitation and hunger. It wasn't about passion alone, it was about recognition, about finding in each other something we had been missing for so long. That night, she led me to her bedroom, and though we lay side by side, it wasn't about hurried desire. It was about closeness. We kissed until our lips grew tired, then simply held one another, our hands exploring not to claim but to understand. Her arms were warm and steady, her breath soft against my neck. For the first time in decades, I fell asleep in another woman's embrace, safe and cherished. In the mornings that followed, I would wake to find her watching me, her hand brushing gently against my hair. "You look so peaceful," she whispered once, and I couldn't help but laugh softly. "I haven't felt peaceful in years," I admitted. And it was true. The restless nights I had spent staring at the ceiling, aching for something I thought I had lost, were gone. With her beside me, even silence felt full, alive. Every night we spent together became a rediscovery. Rediscovering the way a kiss can start softly and build into something that leaves you breathless. Rediscovering how it feels when someone laces their fingers through yours as if they never want to let go. Rediscovering the sweetness of simple gestures, her bringing me tea in bed, me smoothing her hair when it fell across her face, both of us laughing at the small clumsiness of two women out of practice, yet finding our rhythm together. There were moments when desire grew stronger, when our kisses deepened and our hands wandered with urgency. But even then, there was no rush. Every touch carried meaning, every embrace carried care. We were not two young women driven by impatience. We were two older souls savoring every second, aware of how precious it was. One night, after we had kissed until we could kiss no more, we lay tangled together, the moonlight spilling across her sheets. She stroked my hand slowly and whispered, "Do you realize how beautiful you are? Not just your body, but the way you make me feel alive again." Her words brought tears to my eyes. At 65, beauty was something I thought I had left behind, yet here she was, reminding me that love does not fade with age, it only deepens. I kissed her softly, tasting the salt of my own tears on my lips, and whispered back, "You've given me back my youth, not in years but in my heart." And that became the truth of us. With her, I wasn't just an old woman clinging to memories. I was a woman living love again, as raw and as powerful as when I first discovered it decades ago. Love had returned to me, and in its embrace, I learned the most important lesson of all. Love has no age. I often find myself lying awake at night, not because of loneliness anymore, but because of gratitude. There were years when I believed love had abandoned me forever, that the warmth of another woman's kiss was something I would only carry as a memory. I had accepted silence, emptiness, the stillness of days that blended into one another. But life, in its quiet, miraculous way, gave me something I never expected, her. When I think back to that evening when she first came for dinner, it feels almost like fate was guiding her to my doorstep. Two women, both aching in different ways, both searching for something we thought we would never find again. And yet here we are, night after night, sharing stories, sharing laughter, sharing touches that heal the kind of wounds no one else can see. With her, I have rediscovered the simple joys I thought were lost. The way she holds my hand when we walk together, her thumb brushing over my skin as if to remind me she's there. The way she leans her head on my shoulder when we sit in silence, watching the evening fade into night. The way her eyes soften before she kisses me, as though every kiss is a vow she makes not to let go of what we've found. We have both carried years of loneliness, scars of unspoken desires, and the quiet pain of feeling invisible to the world. But together, we are visible again. Together, we are alive. She has shown me that age does not steal our ability to love, to desire, to crave intimacy. If anything, it makes it more profound, more cherished. Every embrace feels sacred because we know the rarity of it. Tonight, as we lie in her bed with the soft glow of the lamp washing over us, I turn to her and cup her face in my hands. She smiles, her lips trembling slightly, and whispers, "I never thought I would find this again." "Neither did I reply, my voice breaking, because the truth of it pierces me so deeply. Then our lips meet, slow at first, then fuller, warmer, more desperate. It is not the desperate hunger of youth. It is something deeper, richer. It is a kiss that carries years of waiting, of longing, of believing we were forgotten by love. I hold her close, feeling her heartbeat against mine, and she pulls me tighter as if she fears I might slip away. But I won't. Not now, not ever. We kiss until words are unnecessary, until all that remains is the closeness of our bodies, the steady rhythm of our breath, and the comfort of knowing we have found each other. When at last we pull apart, she rests her forehead against mine, and in that quiet moment, I feel the weight of my years fall away. We may not be young anymore. My hair has silvered, her hands carry the marks of time, and our bodies move slower than they once did. But in her arms, none of that matters. In her arms, I feel my youth return, not in the mirror but in my soul. And as I drift to sleep in her embrace, I know one truth with absolute certainty. Love came back to me, not in the springtime of my life, but in its autumn. And perhaps that makes it even more beautiful. For though the years ahead may be fewer, they will be filled with a love as deep and enduring as any I have ever known. In her arms, I am young again.